Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to do a few things, including how to print seamless vinyl like this and how to color in your template if you wanted to print a backdrop on it. This is going to be a bit of a long tutorial, but please stay tuned to learn how to make a super cute template tumbler like this. I hope you enjoy this tutorial and let's get started. This template bundle includes 5 different bow options, and it also has ribbon options if you wanted to overlay them with some cute vinyl. For this tumbler, we're going to be using the pencil style bow, and for now we'll be deleting everything that we won't be using. So the first thing we'll be doing is unlocking the aspect ratio on this template and changing the dimensions to what we measured our tumbler to be. In my case, it's a 20-ounce tumbler measuring 9.126 by 7.8. Any of my templates that are assigned for 20-ounce tumblers can also be used for 30-ounce, so all you have to do is just change the dimensions of your template. This is the image that we're going to be using, and I'm going to show you how to set it up to print it seamlessly. So that we can get an idea of where our image is going to be positioned to our template, we're going to go to our duplicate panel and duplicate our template once. Then we're going to select both templates and group them. With our aspect ratio locked, we're going to grab our image and change the width to the dimensions of our tumbler. We're going to grab everything and center it to our page so we can have a better idea of what this tumbler is going to look like. In this case, I do want more of the books to show and I want to scale them down a bit, so I'll be resizing my image, keeping the aspect ratio locked. Once we're happy with the look, we need to duplicate that image to fill in our template. So we're going to grab our image, duplicate it once to the side, then grab both of those images and make a compound path. Then we're going to change the width of the image to the size of our template in our tumbler. Now to get a full view of what that's going to look like on our tumbler and our template, we're going to take our image, release the compound path, then we're going to duplicate it one more time to the side, then we're going to grab everything again and duplicate it twice down. Then we'll make everything into a compound path again. Now we center our image to the page and to the template and bring the image to the back so we can see how it's going to look on our tumbler and on our template. At this point, if you wanted to change anything as far as sizing goes, we would only change the height of the image, not the width, because this is already set to meet seamlessly. In my case, I wanted to show a little bit more of the bottom books and the top apples, so I did adjust my height by a tiny bit. Once we're happy with what our tumbler is going to look like, we're going to grab everything and make sure that it's centered to the page. Then we're going to move the template out of the way and create a rectangle with our template and tumbler dimensions. We're going to center that to the page, then grab the image and that rectangle and click intersect on our modify panel. If the action separates your image into smaller pieces, you just have to grab everything and click make under the modify panel. So our image is now ready to print. You can either print it here from Silhouette Studio or use a different application. In my case, I'll be using Photoshop, so I'm going to be saving this as a PNG file. So to do that, I'm going to change my canvas size to the size of the image, then centering the image to the canvas. And to save it, we're going to go to File, Save As. We're going to name our image and save as type PNG. We're going to change our DPI to 300 and save. You absolutely don't have to do this, but I'm going to take this one step further and I'm going to color in my template so that it also colors over the top of my vinyl and I can use that as a background for my glitter and I don't have to do double coats if I feel like my coverage is not enough. So we're going to use our single cut line template and we're going to break it apart by clicking on group and release under our modify panel until the template breaks apart. We're then going to delete the outer box and grab the rest of the template and make it into a compound path. Under page setup, we need to make sure that our snap to grid is on. And we're going to be using our offset panel to offset the template and convert it into full shapes instead of lines. So our template is made up of lines. It's not made up of full shapes. So if we try to put a fill into the template, it's going to look very odd. You're not going to have full fills. That's why we're going to be using the offset to convert this into full shapes. So we're going to try to offset as little as we can, and we're going to start off with an offset of 0.001. This is actually going to give us some small pieces that we don't want. We want full shapes. So we're going to delete that and try again with the 0.002. That actually gives us exactly what we want, and it's not a huge offset, so we're going to keep that. Once we apply the offset, we're going to click on Make Compound Path and scooch the template over with our snap grid still on. Now we grab our original template again and do an internal offset again as little as we can. So we're going to go with a 0.001. We apply it, then scooch whatever we grabbed over to the template that we offsetted. We're going to grab our offset and release the compound path, and we're going to delete the tag. Since I know that the tag on the original template is a full shape, I'm going to release the compound path on that original template and grab that tag and scoot it over. This is why it's so important to keep our snap to grid on so that everything snaps together and it's in the place that it should be. Then we're going to select everything from our offset template and make a compound path, and because we no longer need our original one, we can just select everything and delete it. We're going to take our template that is now full shapes and we're going to center it back to the page. Then we're going to release the compound path so that we can color it in. First thing we're going to do is zoom in so that we can grab only the outer outline of the template and delete it. So now we can start coloring in our template. I'm going to grab the ribbons, clicking shift and selecting them all individually, then make a compound path since they're all going to be the same color. Then on my fill, I'm going to select the hot pink that I want, and we can even bring in our image so that we can color drop colors in the actual vinyl that we would like to pick up. So for example, in this case, I want the hot pink from these little hearts here, so I'm going to color drop those so that I can match that same color into my template. Now we're going to grab the tip of our pencil and we're going to change that to black. And for the rest of our pencil bow, I grabbed an image from online to match the colors as much as I could. So even though we're going to glitter right over this, having these background colors is going to help so we don't have to do a second coat and we have really good coverage. And just like we did with the ribbon, we're going to grab all the rest of the pieces and color dropping them to change the color. If you ever run into an issue like this, in this case, everything turned yellow, including the eraser and the metal part of the pencil, we're going to fix it by separating those two pieces. Now we're going to zoom in. We're going to turn off snap to grid, grab our knife tool, then set that to 0. Check auto apply and change that to solid if you have it on outline because we want these pieces to be solid. Then we click, drag, and release where we want to separate the pencil from that metal part, and repeat that on the area where we want to separate the metal part from the eraser. And now that we've separated those two pieces, we can grab them individually and change their fill color. Then we're going to select the two pieces that form the tag, make a compound path, and change the fill color to that as well. In this case, I'll be using white. So at this point, I've made a compound path out of all the yellow pieces and all the pink pieces. Then we grab everything and we group it together and remove the stroke. Now that our template is colored in, we're ready to print it. But before we do that, we have to resize it to our tumbler dimensions. To do that, we're going to go to Snap to Grid. Then we're going to draw a rectangle around the template, which was the original size that we downloaded the template, a 9 by 8. Then we're going to grab everything, group it together, and resize it to our tumbler dimensions. Then we change our canvas size to the size of our tumbler. We grab our digital image. We also change that to the size of our tumbler. Then we grab our template and our image and center it to the page. And if we duplicate this to the side, we can see exactly what our tumbler is going to look like on the front and the back. So this is now ready to print from here from Silhouette Studio, or you can save it as a PNG file to print it from elsewhere. So now we're going to be moving on to cutting our template. I do not own a Cameo, so I use Cricut Design Space to cut my templates from my Cricut machine. That's the program that you're looking at right now. For some reason, Cricut Design Space opens everything grouped, even though it's not made that way. All we have to do is select everything and on our layers panel, click ungroup. In this case, we're only going to be using the teacher style bows, so I'm going to go ahead and select everything else and delete it. I'll only be keeping those bows and the ribbons for options for later. We're only going to be cutting our single cut line template, so for now we're going to be hiding everything else. We need to make sure our aspect ratio is unlocked and we resize our template to our tumbler dimensions. Then we just move on to cutting it like we normally would on double-sided adhesive sheets. I use washi sheet, and depending on the sharpness of my blade, I might go with normal, less, or more pressure. So now we have our printed vinyl and our double-sided adhesive sheet cut. I cut all around the border of the vinyl, and I cut all around the border of that template so that I would only have the ribbon and the bow and that tag to place onto my vinyl. So I remove a little piece of the backing of that double-sided adhesive sheet, and I just pull it back a tiny bit so that I can cut it with scissors and use that as my anchor, and then I'll be removing the rest of it once I've positioned it properly onto that vinyl. Then I align my template to that vinyl part that we colored in as much as I possibly could. And when I found a good position, I removed the backing from those anchor pieces to stick down the double-sided adhesive to the vinyl. I removed the remaining backing of our template and slowly pushed it down onto the vinyl. And then I did the same thing for the little tag piece. To put the vinyl on the tumbler, I used that same anchor method by cutting off a piece of the edging of the backing from that vinyl so that I can first align that vinyl to the tumbler and then remove that little backing to anchor it down. So with the backing still on the vinyl, I aligned it to my tumbler as best as I could, and once I was happy with that alignment, I removed that little slit that I cut off and anchored that vinyl down onto my tumbler. I slowly removed the rest of the backing as I pushed that vinyl down and rolled the tumbler along and got all the vinyl onto the tumbler. Then I moved on to weeding and glittering. I always start with the darkest first. In this case, it is black, and I brush everything in excess off of the tumbler and my working surface to try and minimize any contamination between glitter colors. So we didn't actually have to color in our template and use it as a backdrop for when we're glittering, but the benefit of this is that we now are going to have a really, really good coverage since we have that colored template on the background. Had I skipped the step of coloring in our template, I probably would have used some white vinyl as the backing for this template, just so we couldn't see the patterned vinyl through the double-sided adhesive sheet in our glitter. But I probably would have still gone in with the second coat just so that I could be happy with my coverage. I wanted to glitter my bottom with that same pink as the ribbons, so I went in with some acrylic pink paint to use that as my base and my adhesive for the first coat of that pink glitter. And after one coat of epoxy, I remeasured the width of my tumbler so that I can cut out the outline for our pencil bow. Okay, so now we're ready to cut our bow outline. I have set up these templates so that they are almost as if it was a whole template, but we're not going to be cutting out the whole thing. We're just using this box so that we can resize. That's why we remeasured our tumbler after the epoxy. So we're going to select our template and we're going to change it to the dimensions that we measured out our tumbler to be after epoxy. So we're only going to change the width. The height is going to stay the same. So we want to make sure our aspect ratio is unlocked and change the height to the original height that we used and modify the width to what we measured our tumbler to be after epoxy. So this template is not one whole piece, it's actually a group of elements. We want to ungroup it so that we can pick the elements that we're going to be cutting out. So on our layers panel, we go to ungroup so that we can separate everything, and we can now delete the box since we're no longer going to need it. That was just to help us resize our bow offset. So I made this into a group just to give the option in case you all wanted to cut these pieces separately, like if, for example, you wanted to cut different colors of each piece. But in my case, I'm going to be cutting all of these out of black, so I'm just going to select everything and change the color to black just for reference. The additional little tag there is in case you wanted to use an actual string to attach the tag to the bow. I have a tumbler that I made this way and it turned out really cute, but today we're not going to be doing that, so I'm going to delete that tag. So the bow and tag are ready to cut, so I'm just going to select everything and attach it. I designed the ribbons so that they would be at an 11.49 width and that they would still fit your ribbons on your template even if you change the dimensions, but I would still measure the width of the ribbon on your tumbler to kind of get a better idea of how these vinyl ribbons are going to fit on there. So this is the one that I'm going to be using, which is the polka dotted one. I just changed the dimensions to an 11.49 and kept my aspect ratio locked so that it resized proportionally. Then I duplicated since I knew I would be needing two of them. So I'm also going to be cutting some pinstripes so that I can put them along the edge of the ribbons and along the top rim and bottom rim of the tumbler. So according to these instructions on my pinstripe file, if I want a 0.04 thickness of a pinstripe, I multiply that 0.04 times 5 to get the width so that those 5 pinstripes all cut at the same width of 0.04. So in this case, I'm going to cut these at a 0.2 by 11.49. Or 11.5, which is the maximum that Cricut will allow on a 12 by 12 mat. So these are all set and we can just move on to cutting now. Now that our vinyl is all cut, we can start applying it to our tumbler. We're going to start with the polka dotted ribbon, trying to align it to our tumbler as best as possible and doing that for all 4 sections. I did lose a few polka dots as I was applying this. However, because I did cut a lot of extra, I was able to just grab some polka dots from other sections and replace them. I found that doing a reverse weed on these ribbons was probably the best way to go. That way I wouldn't lose as many polka dots and I could use the rectangle of the ribbon to help me align that to the tumbler. Then I moved on to weeding off all of the polka dots that went outside of the ribbons. I think this was probably the most tedious part until I figured out that doing it with a knife instead of with the weeding tool was a lot faster. And to give my ribbons a cleaner and sharper look, I applied some pinstripes along the edges and trimmed off anything that was in excess of the ribbon. I also applied a bit of a thicker pinstripe on the top and the bottom of the tumbler. I feel like this gives the tumbler a more cleaner and finished look. I also applied my logo at the bottom of the tumbler in vinyl, and I did a reverse weed on this one too since it has some small details on it. I applied UV resin on all of the edges of the pinstripes and on all of the edges along the bow pencil where the pinstripes or the vinyl could lift, and then this way I could sort of smooth out the vinyl that I have already put down so that I can put that bow offset right over it without having to do a coat of epoxy and then the bow. Applying the bow offset is the trickiest part since you do need to be able to see where you're aligning it on your tumbler. I used Reynolds Cut Right wax paper to help me see through and align it better to the tumbler. I learned this wax paper trick from John at CST. I have used other wax papers and none of them have worked like this does. All my other wax papers just get stuck to the vinyl. This one doesn't stick, and if it does, it's really easy to remove. So once the bow was aligned where I needed it to be, I used the anchor method with the transfer tape, removed the wax paper, and pressed down the offset. Then I repeated these same steps for the tag and the little string. I applied 2 more coats of epoxy to finish off this super cute tumbler. And that's it, friends. I hope that you all enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more tutorials like this. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments for me. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and thank you for your support. Bye!